Christopher Nolan's cinematic adaptation of The Odyssey is now in cinemas near you. But good luck getting tickets because showtimes have been sold out more than a year in some cases. A good time then to bring in Siddhant Adlakha, a film critic based in New York. Siddhant, it's great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you are among the few who've seen this film already. In fact, you've seen it twice, you said. What were your expectations going in, and did it meet them?
My expectations included a large-scale, grandiose epic, and Christopher Nolan is generally good at delivering those things, especially with this one, which is actually the first Hollywood feature shot entirely in the 70 millimeter IMAX format, which is as big and as clear and as immersive as you could possibly get. But he's also someone who tends to, change things around in a very interesting way with his adaptations. And even though he's adapting a nearly 3,000-year-old text, he makes it very contemporary and very relevant to today. And it was really emotionally fulfilling in all those ways.
There's been a lot said about the cinematic and technological achievements of this film. In fact, if I could ask you about that, you mentioned that this is the first ever feature film to be shot entirely on IMAX cameras. Talk to us about the significance of that, because that's no easy task. And was there anything else that you really see as, an achievement in terms of what he took on there?
Sure. The reason no one's been able to do this so far is because IMAX cameras are generally very loud, so it's impossible to capture dialogue. Until recently, when him and his team made these enormous, I want to say like bubbles or blimps for the camera that would sort of drown out the motor sounds. So of course there was a need to then figure out how to get actors in a close space next to each other with the cameras right by them. And so because of that, they were acting opposite each other with mirrors. But that's not something you obviously see on the big screen. All of that is sort of edited and cut around. But as a technical achievement, it's maybe one of the most intimate large screen films I've ever seen. Because as much as we may think of, the large frame format as something that delivers spectacle and landscapes, and this very much is that, it's also something that Nolan uses to give us a sense of proximity to the characters and to highlight their isolation and loneliness.
And of course, at the center of the film is Odysseus, or Ulysses. But the man at the center of this entire production who had, the audacity really to take this on is Christopher Nolan. And I know this because we go some way back, but you've actually been in a Nolan film. So if I may ask you impartially, where would you rank The Odyssey across his body of work?
Sure. I should clarify that I was very, very far in the background of the stadium scene in The Dark Knight Rises, so don't try and look out for me. I've tried. But this is definitely on the higher end of his work because he's someone who, even though he keeps telling, I don't want to say the same kind of story over and over again, but he often tells stories of, these guilt-ridden male protagonists trying to find their way home to their families. Which is sort of at the heart of, how the Odyssey has influenced Western storytelling. But this is probably not the kind of movie he would have made 20 something years ago. Actually, he was one of the initial directors tapped for the movie Troy with Brad Pitt, but things ended up changing around. But now, in 2026, the movie he makes is really chaotic and visceral, and it's probably not something that he would have done when he was first starting out. And so, because of that, I think I would probably say it's maybe one of the best films he's ever made in terms of how emotionally impactful it is at every stage.
Wow. Okay, that's high praise. Maybe one of the best films he's ever made, and took him 20 years to finally get down to do it. Not unlike his protagonist, Odysseus himself. This is a 3,000-year-old epic, and there was this preemptive backlash ahead of this film release about casting choices, the type of language used. We're hearing a lot less about that now, I should say. But did you come away with any concerns, any areas where you felt it maybe fell short? Were you satisfied with Nolan's treatment of female characters? That's something he does get criticized for.
Yeah, and it's a fair criticism across his body of work, but I think the way he leans into certain aspects of the text, and I don't want to spoil anything, it really highlights the way he's kind of analyzing this story as he's telling it. And so I would say this is probably a marked improvement in how women come across in his films. As for the casting controversies, I think that's something that is sort of a just a manufactured outrage that you don't really need to pay attention to, because the approach here is sort of Shakespearean. It's kind of an anything goes, cast the best person for the role type of approach. As for the language, so I think the primary source he used was Emily Wilson's translation, which is it sort of simplifies a lot of the more verbose translations of the text over the last several decades, but it kind of takes it back to the simplicity that, as I understand it, the poem would have had when it was first quote unquote written. And so the language ends up being very simple and accessible, but for a pointed purpose, because all the characters, regardless of where their actors are from, speak with American accents, which is something that a lot of Hollywood viewers will be familiar with. And it's also something that in the process makes you think about the centricity of not just Hollywood storytelling, but also America as an imperial force in today's world. And that's something that's at the heart of this adaptation too.
Yeah, and that's probably that's something that the translator, the first woman ever to have translated Homer's Odyssey and Iliad, actually spoke about, saying that it's unfortunate that a lot of translations are written in the sort of English of a few generations ago, when actually this is 3,000 years old. And if you want to do, an accurate translation, it would have to be in the kind of language that we use today. There's also the fact that she wrote it in verse. I could talk about this all day, but Siddhant, finally, as a film enthusiast, how has all of this hype been for you, to see people showing up to screenings at 2 and 3 in the morning, folks traveling to different cities to watch it in 70mm IMAX? And do you have any advice for some of our viewers who might be planning to buy a ticket?
Look, the only way I was able to watch it on opening day here in New York at I believe, the largest IMAX screen in North America was by buying tickets a year ago. And currently tickets at that particular screen are sold out through, I believe, the middle of August. But there are multiple ways to watch it, which may not be the same like vertical large screen format. So I would say, if you can get tickets to it, whether it's a Dolby cinema or regular 70mm cinema, just watch it as soon as you can, and let the IMAX release keep rolling out, because you'll probably get to see it that way eventually. It does seem like it's going to stick around in theaters for a while.
All right, Siddhant, we leave it there, but thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and your insights.
Thank you for having me.
That is film critic Siddhant Adlakha.